In this Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader video, I'm going to be going over my impressions of the alpha that I've been playing off and on for the last few days. If you didn't know, the alpha comes out tomorrow for people that bought the Developer's Digital Pack or Collector's Edition of the game. So if you want to play the alpha for that, you'll need to get one of these. Otherwise, you'll just have to wait for the beta. So first, let me just say before I get into what I liked and disliked about the alpha that I saw this game at Gamescom and spent a lot of time with Owlcat. This was probably my game of the show at Gamescom. It was probably the best game that I saw from the presentation that I was given. Been very, very excited to play this, so my expectations for this game were very high going into this alpha. That being said, let's get into the things that I like about the alpha, and the first thing is that they did a really fantastic job of capturing the Warhammer 40,000 universe, the feel, the vibe, the art style of the game, from the audio to the design of the levels and areas. Felt very Warhammer 40,000 like. They did a fantastic job in this regard, and as you're playing through the levels and you're traveling around in space, you just sort of get this immersion that I didn't think would be possible in a game of this nature. I think the thing that's really impressed me so far is that this universe is so much different than Pathfinder. They've added so many things that you wouldn't see in Pathfinder. I mean, you have the same sort of general Owlcat style to the game, but like you're flying around in a spaceship and you're going to these different star systems and, you know, exploring planets and scanning them for resources, not unlike Mass Effect. Way, way different than something you would see in Pathfinder, and yet they've somehow managed to do it to an extent that it feels natural, and I think that's really, really awesome. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the turn-based combat. I like the format of the turn-based combat in this game. I like to see that turn-based combat is sort of making a resurgence in games coming from Midnight Suns that had really good turn-based combat. I really like the option that they had in Wrath of the Righteous. You saw Pillars of Eternity 2 has an option. Obviously, Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be turn-based. There is a lot of resurgence in turn-based combat, and I'm really happy to see that they have made this game. It's only turn-based, so you have to play that way, and they've really leaned into it, and they're going to obviously be working on making this as polished as possible throughout, you know, the rest of the alpha, beta, etc. The turn-based combat plays a little bit like XCOM. You have a cover system that's got like high cover, low cover, and it has a little bit more depth to it in terms of the abilities that you can do instead of just like using your weapon or, you know, going into Overwatch and positioning being a big part of it. There is like all these different abilities you can use from different classes, and the way each class plays is a little bit more varied than I would say something like XCOM is. It's not to say that there isn't some similarity, like you have melee units and ranged units, but there is more to do in terms of what you can do in the combat side of things than you would find in something like XCOM. So that's really, really appealing to me. And the other thing is the storytelling and writing so far has been top-notch. I really like the storytelling style of Owlcat and what they've done with Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous. If you like the storytelling of those games, then you will probably almost certainly like the storytelling of this. There is a lot of lore and background context that I am not so familiar with in Warhammer 40,000 that I have to spend a lot of time reading the dictionary and things like that. But it's still really, really engaging and really well written, and I feel like very immersed. It adds to the immersion of it. It's absolutely fantastic. Another really strong point of this game. Those things being said, let's talk a little bit about some of the things I didn't like. First up is performance. I realize that this is an alpha, so a lot's going to change probably before launch, but it definitely something I want to mention here because performance was really bad, like really bad. I couldn't hit 60 FPS at 1440p with a 2080 Ti graphics card. Like, this game is not a graphically intensive game. Like, it doesn't have the greatest graphics at all by any means. And a lot of the time, I was struggling even to hit 30 FPS, which is just crazy. So I hope this game is not coming to last gen, because I don't think it'll run at all on last gen platforms. But they definitely got to do something to increase the performance of this game. And performance has been kind of a sore spot for them with Wrath of the Righteous and with Kingmaker at their launches. So this is something I feel like they really need to work on and improve before the launch of this game. The next point is that although I like the turn-based combat system and I do appreciate that there are more abilities than XCOM, the combat feels a bit archaic to me. It feels like I played this game or this type of combat like 10-15 years ago. That's about how old XCOM is at this point. And even though there are all these different abilities and each class is different and they have all these things they can do, a lot of them are active abilities that just give you passive benefit. For instance, they buff themselves or debuff the enemy. So effectively, you're using abilities, but what you're doing is moving and shooting, just like XCOM. So it's a little bit disappointing. And the thing that really strikes me about this as being a potential problem is that the characters you start with in the alpha are level 15. I mean, this is the gameplay that you're seeing at level 15. That's how it feels at level 15. It feels like you're using active abilities that give you passive benefit, that don't really make combat feel more dynamic. So how are the first 15 levels going to feel before you even get these abilities? I don't know. That's a serious question for me, and it makes me wonder if combat is going to be as enjoyable for me as it was in Wrath of the Righteous and Kingmaker, because I really, really love the combat in those games. That was the best part for me, and I don't know if I'm going to like it as much in this game if that's how most of the combat is going to be. And the last negative point for me is the space battles. So a lot of times when you're exploring like different galaxies or whatever, there are, you know, ships that you can go up to, and all of a sudden a battle triggers and you go to this like map and you're in your spaceship and you're fighting in your spaceship against other ships. This is absolutely terrible. Not only does it look like it's a 35-year-old video game that you'd be playing, like Space Invaders or something like that, it's not fun, it takes forever, it's clunky, and it really doesn't add anything to the game. It's sort of ironic in a way, because every game they've made so far has had one element like this that people didn't like. Like Kingmaker had the management system that people didn't like. Wrath of the Righteous had the army battles that people didn't like. And now we have the space battles that I'm 99% sure people aren't going to like. And it's just like, why do we keep adding this to the game if it doesn't make the game better? Or why don't we take more time to develop it to make it better? So hopefully this is something that will get, you know, improvement as the alpha expands and into the beta and so on. But right now the space battles are just absolutely atrocious, and I want nothing to do with them in this game. So those things being said, those are the things I like, those are the things I don't like. Things that I want to see change before the launch of this game, or maybe even before the beta, whenever that is, assuming they have a beta. First of all, I would love to see an improved UI. I don't really like the UI they have so far. It's very overwhelming for a new player. I had to sit down and like go into the character menu and read all the abilities. It took me about an hour of just reading stuff before I could actually play in combat and understand what the heck I was doing. Because all the tooltips are abbreviated, correlating to the stats, and if you're not familiar with that, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I would really like to see a UI rework in terms of, you know, tooltips and combat mechanics, so that players can not feel so overwhelmed when they start playing this game. It's not as complicated as it first looks, I will say that, but a better UI with better explanations of things would probably make it easier for players wade into this game that are a little bit scared watching this gameplay. The next thing, obviously, is space battles need rework. I think this is obvious from the way I was talking. If you watch the gameplay and you see it, I don't think you would disagree with me. It needs something to freshen it up. It feels old. It's not fun in any way. They need to make it more interesting, and whether they need to speed it up, make it real time, I don't know what they need to do, but they need to make it more interesting in some way. Otherwise, it's just going to bore people to death. And the last thing I would like to see is I want this game to be fully voiced. I feel like it would be a huge improvement over their other games, and because of the amount of immersion they already have going on with Warhammer 40,000 universe and the things, and the writing is really good, I feel like this would really put their game like up over, you know, where their other games are. Like, they need to keep continuing to improve what they put out as a studio, and I feel like we're at the point in time where games are expected to be fully voiced, and they're not a small studio that nobody's ever heard of anymore. They've put out 2 really good titles. They've learned from those titles. I would absolutely love to see this game fully voiced, and I think it would attract a lot of players that don't really want to read all the text. They can just listen to it, and if they did it well, it would just make this game so much better. So what do you guys think from seeing the gameplay so far? Am I way off with the things that I've critiqued here, or do you guys see some of the things that I'm seeing? What are you looking forward to most in this game, and what are you afraid of that they might not get right before this game launches? Let me know in the comments below.